So one of the topics that has been coming up a lot, and hopefully it's on some of your radars, is this idea of, okay, what is the weed population going to look like post-fire? And so I would say it's going to be impressive from all sorts of angles. We're going to see lots of weeds that we knew were in the area, and we're going to see a lot of new weeds that we maybe didn't necessarily have in the area. So it's necessary, and hopefully you're going to see that theme repeat itself through a couple of the slides. So there's been this already sort of this comment that has been made about, there's been this realization that after a disturbance such as the fire, that we are going to have just this massive influx of resources. And those resources, what I mean by resources is nutrients, it is water, it's all of these things that were, before the fire, being used up by all of that plant life that was out there. And so, I've got this little picture here that kind of depicts this. I mean, we had, a fairly competitive, very dense ecosystem, whether it was shrubs, herbaceous weeds and grasses and forbs, or conifers, oaks, all of those things in the landscape that were using a lot of water, a lot of nutrients before the fire. And once the fire happened, we now have this sort of blanket canvas, this landscape that still has all of those nutrients, still has all of those water, all of that water, it's in the soil, but now we probably have even more because that fire burned up all of those trees, returning a lot of, the carbon, the nitrogen, a lot of the nutrients that were tied up in the actual plants themselves. Now a lot of that is in the ash layer on the landscape. And so it's basically sort of this prime planting bed for, hopefully, reforestation of conifers and oaks, but also weeds. And we call them weeds because, these are plants out of place. These are plants that we don't necessarily want in the landscape. And a weed to me may be different than a weed to you, and we may define different plants as different weeds, but there's certainly a list of plants that hopefully a lot of us can rally behind and say, we don't want those in our landscape. And so, I've got this sort of progression that, we have this disturbance. It results in this sort of increase in available resources. And again, talking about water and nutrients. And that high level of nutrients really is going to favor the weeds. They are weeds because they have a tendency to outcompete other stuff. And so usually after fire, after major disturbances such as this, we have a huge outbreak of weeds. And so we can use our knowledge to help that, in terms of fighting this battle. I put up here, this is our pre-fire knowledge. So before the fire, we knew what was out on the landscape, right? We knew driving up Jesus Maria Road or up Mountain Ranch Road or, over on Electra, wherever it was, we knew what plants were considered weeds in that natural environment. And so I put, I originally started the list with 10, and then it went to 12, and then it went to 20 late yesterday, and I was like, okay, I've got to just narrow it down. And so I took it back to 12 because these are plants that we knew that were in this area, and they have been causing some problems for a number of years. And so this is our pre-fire knowledge. I'm just going to quickly go through one slide of each of these. So hopefully, if you're not familiar with them, you can say, oh yeah, I've seen that, or oh, I better be on the lookout for that. So the first one is yellow star thistle. Hopefully everybody knows this wicked plant. covers roughly 15 million acres in the state of California. This is actually a picture that a colleague took here in Calaveras County a number of years ago. And so, you probably recognize the very spiny head on it. This is a major problem. It continues to be a major problem in California, and this is going to be a major problem after the fire. These, where we have yellow star thistle, we have tons of data to show that after a fire, yellow star thistle has tendency to, basically, it's a wake-up call to all of the seeds that are left in the soil that say, here's your chance. So this is the year to be out there looking for yellow star thistle and to do something about it. This plant germinates with the first fall rains, so yep, it's already up. I went out driving yesterday in through some of the burn areas, and I'm already seeing yellow star thistle seedlings coming up. It looks kind of like this picture on the right, very inconspicuous, and it'll pretty much look kind of like that all winter long. So it really kind of just hangs out really close to the ground for most of the winter months. But it's out there. So if you knew of patches, and it makes it hard from a control standpoint in the condition that you all are in, because usually when I work with ranchers and landowners that have yellow star thistle, I say, go out and look at last year's skeletons, and that'll kind of give you an idea of where you need to do your control efforts. We don't have any of last year's skeletons. We have, bare ground. And so hopefully using your pre-fire knowledge of knowing, okay, yeah, I think I had yellow star thistle on my property. It was down there. It was over there. You can use that to hopefully kind of use that for helping guide some control efforts. So, as I mentioned, it's already up, it's germinating, it's going to continue to germinate throughout the winter months. Whenever we get a rain, we've got data that shows 2 weeks later, you get a flush of germination of yellow star thistle. So be on the lookout for this one. The one good thing about this is it's an annual, so this only persists through seed production. So you prevent the plant from making more seed, and you can burn up, over time, a couple of years, all of the seeds that are in the soil. Then you can get on top of this plant. You can manage it. Another plant that is becoming a huge problem in the state of California and all over the burn area is this plant here, Medusa head. This is a rangeland grass, noxious grass from parts of Europe and Asia. It's been here for over 150 years, and I would say just in the last probably 30 years, it is just running rampant in the state, invading more and more annual rangelands. The easy way to tell this plant apart, because grasses can be very hard sometimes to identify. I mean, this kind of looks like a foxtail if you don't really know it specifically. One of the key features about this plant is it stays green much later than any of the other annual grasses. So if you have any type of green grass in an annual rangeland setting in July and August, if there's any green grasses, chances are you have this one. So again, using that pre-knowledge of, oh yeah, I remember there being some green grasses in July or August, way after all of the other grasses died, then you may have this particular grass. So it has very, very long awns, kind of like the Medusa head figure that we all know, so that's where it gets the name, but extremely invasive, very, very competitive, outcompetes all of the other annuals and creates sort of this large infestation. And animals have a tendency not to eat it. So right now it's germinating as well. Saw some yesterday. This one I did not put a picture of the seedling just because it looks like a grass. And so it can be very hard to identify very early on. But what I would say is it's very pale green, blue-green in color. So be on the lookout for some very, very small, wimpy grasses this time of the year, and chances are it could be this. But again, this only is an annual, so it only persists by seed. So if you're not sure if you have it, wait till springtime, wait till everything starts, showing their flowers, what they look like. And if you see something that looks like this, then call us, we can confirm it, or just get out there and control it before it sets seed. Another one we have in and around the burn area is this here. This is oblong spurge. It's a relative of all the euphorbs, poinsettias, so hopefully you're picking up a theme that this is a very toxic plant. It's a perennial, what I would call kind of a herbaceous perennial, grows to about 3 feet tall, has these beautiful yellow flowers, and unfortunately it is extremely competitive in riparian areas, and now I'm seeing it in rangelands. It's just, this plant is taking a foothold, and this is one that is going to, again, after the fire, it seems to respond to disturbance. And so it is a perennial, so it not only spreads by seeds, it also spreads by these sort of ground running stems, and so it's going to be, all of it burned off where it was and around the fire, but all of those underground stems and roots are just going to resprout, and so it's going to come back with a vengeance. And because it already was established, it's going to be it's going to just outcompete anything else that's trying to get established. This one is relatively in small populations, but we're seeing it more and more. This is skeleton weed, a close relative to yellow star thistle. Has little, kind of like, I would say, daisy, kind of looks like a dandelion, as you can see in that bottom picture. So this would be right now, it's starting to germinate as well with these first fall rains. And it has little sunflower-like flowers, little tiny yellow flowers. Blooms very, very late in the summer, typically in July, August is when it flowers. And then it makes these little seeds that have little tufts of hairs. And those little tufts of hair blow it in the wind, just like a dandelion. So these ones spread by wind. And this one is actually a perennial. So unlike yellow star thistle that just lives for a year, this plant can live for multiple years. So again, it is in and around the burn area, and expect to see this plant take off as well. The name comes from like the skeletal appearance of this plant, so very, very few leaves on it, mostly just bare, naked green stems is why it gives that name skeleton weed. Another plant in the burn area, Klamath weed. Also known as St. John's wort, if you're familiar with that name. Another plant with lots and lots of yellow flowers, lots and lots of seeds. Can form very large monocultures, or just basically stands of this plant. Poisonous to wildlife and to livestock. And this also is a perennial. So this one has those creeping stems and is going to just send up new shoots as a result of the disturbance. So another one to be on the lookout for. This one probably not so common for many of you unless you have it in and around your property. This is spiny plumeless thistle. And there's lots and lots of thistles, so and I would be on the lookout for, the majority of them are non-native, but some are much, much more invasive than others. This is a very tall thistle. It can grow 4, 5, 6 feet tall, extremely spiny, with these with these purple flowers at the top. I do want to point out a gentleman in the back. Kevin, if you would maybe just give a wave. Kevin Wright, if you don't know, Kevin is the county ag commissioner here in Calaveras County, and they do a lot of the weed control efforts for the county, and regulate much of agriculture in terms of pesticide use, and so they have been working on some populations of this particular plant for a number of years, trying to eradicate it, and I think they're probably getting really, really close. But this potentially could be a problem just because of where the fire burned. So be on the lookout for this one. So really tall thistles you see this spring, contact Kevin or myself because we definitely want to know about it. So this one is a biennial, so meaning that this plant lives for 2 years. The first year, it's just going to be a little tuft of green leaves, very spiny green leaves, but just these little green leaves. So this spring, this is about what you're going to see. And then next year is when it actually is going to send up this huge 5-6 foot tall flowering structure and actually set seed. But if there's any areas that this plant may have survived from the fire, and it survived as what we call this little rosette or green leaves, then it could potentially flower this spring. Another sunflower relative, so again relative to yellow star thistle and the last thistle, this is smooth distaff thistle. So you're getting a theme, a lot of thistles, or lots and lots of problems. Another one that only a couple of very isolated populations in the state, and not very many in the Sierra Nevadas. And this is one that is becoming more and more established here in Calaveras County and in Tuolumne County. You can see it's kind of got a very branchy pattern. Growth pattern, can grow about 3.5 feet tall, but it is just extremely spiny. Yellow flowers, kind of like yellow star thistle, but whereas yellow star thistle, only the little heads are spiny, this plant is pretty much spiny throughout, and really animals just have a tendency to stay away from it. It is a very, very pokey plant. So this is smooth distaff thistle. Do goats stay away from it? If you force them on it, they'll eat it, but because it's so spiny, they have a tendency to stay away from it. Moving to one of the shrubs to be on the lookout for, this is a plant called gorse. And if you've ever traveled to Scotland or the United Kingdom, this is where that plant is native to. They use this plant as basically as fences, impenetrable fences for livestock and for people. The reason is these plants have thorns all over the shrub, about an inch and a half long, very, very sharp spines on it. And this plant is extremely isolated in terms of populations in California. Fortunately or unfortunately for all of us, we have a population here in Calaveras County, in and around the burn area. This is another one of those plants, because it's so limited in scope in California, the agricultural department has been working on it for years and years. But unfortunately, this plant, it's a legume, so if you're familiar with the legumes, they often have these big old seeds that persist for a really long time. And so you're looking at seed viability in the soil for 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. And so that's a lot of year-to-year management, going out and looking, did anything germinate this year? So Ag Department has been on it, continues to monitor this site. This is, I believe, a relatively young shrub that germinated outside a few years ago that one of their folks took a picture of. Again, this could be a plant that we have a tendency to see thrive after fire. Again, because it's a legume, a lot of legumes do have a tendency to respond positively to fire in terms of releasing seeds from dormancy that are in the soil. So if you see any yellow shrubs and it's spiny, it's probably gorse. Another yellow shrub that you may see that is a close relative to gorse is some of the brooms. So we have two different broom species that are in and around the fire. One is Spanish and one is French. You may have also heard of the one Scotch, which we also have in and around the county, but not in the burn area that I know of. I only know of these two species. And these are also legumes, so very, very similar to what I just mentioned with gorse. The only difference is these don't have thorns. So these are just brightly colored yellow shrubs, and these are also going to probably respond very favorably to the fire, and we're going to see a lot more of these plants. And again, this is another one of those shrubs that the seeds can live for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years in the soil. So we really, really want to try to stay on top of controlling these plants and preventing seed production. Another one that made my top 12 is this guy here. This is Tree of Heaven. And I put it in here because, we have an opportunity here. Usually I don't throw Tree of Heaven in because it is so extremely widespread in a lot of sort of residential areas. This tree is extremely prolific, makes lots and lots of seeds, easily germinates, grows in kind of the worst growing conditions, grows in cracks of concrete it's just crazy. But this plant is well established in a lot of the burn areas. And we have an opportunity here to, if we decide to jump on it and control these plants. They are, a lot of the trees, the large trees have very thin bark, so they're going to probably, a lot of the trees in the high severity burn areas, they're probably going to kill the above ground portion of the trees, but the bad thing is that these trees live and reproduce by underground stems. And so although we may kill whole trees, we're going to see a flurry of resprouting from this plant. I'll show you a picture in a moment, but I did drive down Jesus Maria Road yesterday, and the Tree of Heaven is growing like crazy. I mean, I just literally almost could just sit there and watch it grow. It's responding so quickly. So this is one to be on the lookout for as well. So reproduces by seeds and also by underground stems. Another one that made my top list, this is called stinkwort. Not sure where the wort came from, but it is awfully stinky. This is one that is relatively new to California. It's only been in the state for roughly 30 years, we believe. And it is probably spreading at the fastest pace that I have ever seen or witnessed in terms of noxious weed spread. Many weeds will come introduced to the state. They'll kind of linger for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even 100 years, like the case of yellow star thistle. This plant, since it was first observed back in the 80s, it has just taken off. And so it is a very, very late season annual. It is flowering right now. You can see it up and down Highway 49. It's starting to make its way up Highway 26. This plant is relative to yellow star thistle, so it has little kind of daisy-like flowers, but it has windblown seeds. And so this plant loves disturbance, loves poor growing conditions, thrives on roadsides, and so this is going to be one that I would certainly be on the lookout for and try to stay on top of. It's got a very sticky, because it's very glandular, it's very sticky, very musty smelling, and it persists by seed. So basically grows from seed every year, and very, very late season. So if you drive around right now and you see these little kind of yellow or round green shrubs on the roadsides, it's almost positively this plant here. A couple of more that made my list. This is barbed goat grass. There's two different goat grasses, but the one that we're seeing more and more is barbed goat grass. There's a couple of populations that I would say are relatively close to the burn that I think this plant could potentially spread because it does love disturbance. So this is like Medusa head, stays green very, very late into the season. So if you see anything green in July and August and it's a grass, it's either going to be Medusa head or it's going to be this guy here. So it is also an annual. It germinates with the first fall rain, so it's starting up right now. And prevention and controlling the seeds is really the best and only methods. So those are the pre-knowledge, that's what we knew kind of coming into the fire. We knew those were around, and we know that there's going to be a good possibility that those are going to take off. But now there's this sort of whole post-fire thing that adds to the complexity of what we have to deal with when it comes to weed management. And so I'd like to talk just a little bit about that. So, I put this long title up here. Everybody, we should all, kind of come up with our own sort of, burn area weed management plan. And what do I mean by that? Basically, I mean, we need to be aware, and we need to go out, and we need to probably do something. If we don't care, or if we want to make a difference and not have these weeds become more widespread. So I already mentioned number one, that's kind of the pre-fire knowledge of what we know that's already present. Number two is become familiar with what other potential weed invaders might pop up. And that is really that, I mean, the opportunities for new weed invasions after a fire like this, it's almost endless. And I put down a couple of ways that weeds will and do get introduced, and so I wanted to just touch on those because I think they're important for you to realize as work is going to happen on your land and on your property, and you're going to go through some of these processes. Be aware that that activity might be a pathway for weed invasion. So the first one is, there may be weeds there, that prior to the fire that we didn't know about. So that whole pre-fire knowledge, well, we only know them because they were growing, but there may have been weeds kind of just sitting dormant in the soil for years and years that were just waiting for that fire. As Adam said, there's really, in some of these areas, there's no prior record of fire history. And so some of these seeds may have been dormant for 20, 40, 50, 100 years. And now, the floodgates are open and we might just see them pop up. So that's one way we might see new weeds present. They also get introduced through equipment. And so dozers, could be fire trucks, emergency vehicles, tree crews coming in now, PG&E crews coming in, tree trimmers, any sort of equipment, unfortunately, can be a vector for weed spread. And many of the agencies, including CAL FIRE, actually have protocol now in terms of cleaning equipment before it actually comes into to fires because of that potential. But somebody coming in to do some tree work, who knows where they were yesterday or earlier that day. They may have been in some field that they had to drive through that was covered in yellow star thistle or Medusa head, and all of those seeds are now lodged up under the undercarriage, and now they just got spread all over your property. So be aware of it, ask questions, and be diligent about looking around. Also can be introduced by workers, and so I don't know how many times I've been out in the field working with people, and their shoes or boots might just be inundated with seeds, and it's just because they're out doing stuff. These seeds are really good about clinging on to things, whether it's animals or to us, and so being aware and cognizant of that. They can also be introduced through erosion control efforts. So, there's this big push, and, people are out there trying to make sure that, they prevent erosion control to their best ability, which is, you have to do. But with that comes this potential threat for introduction of new weeds. And so, it could be, if you just go and buy some bales of straw, they could be, who knows what's in them in terms of the potential seeds. And also just if you're going to buy seed to spread across the landscape, those also can be contaminated with lots of seeds. So lots and lots of ways things can be introduced, even in construction material like road base as well. So all of those serve as potential weed sources. So moving on, so you kind of know what weeds you have, what weeds are potentially, how they might be introduced. Now, really, it's about trying to do as much preventative work as possible. So, we have this idea of early detection and rapid response. So if you see a weed, the idea is go out and do something about it, and do it as quickly as you can. And if you're going to use any seed mixes, erosion control mixes, or materials, make sure they're certified weed-free. That's an option, and I know a lot of the materials that have been being distributed are certified weed-free. But as a landowner, I would certainly ask those questions. And then the next thing is cleaning equipment, and then just again, going out and looking. And if you come across plants that you're unsure of, bring them to myself, bring them to the ag department. We have a great resource of master gardeners in the community that we train, and they volunteer for us. They're really good at identification, so use us. I would love to be inundated with unknown plants to help you all know what's growing on your property. And lastly is, this is not the year to go on vacation. Although it sounds nice, really this is the year you have to do control efforts for weeds. Really just takes 1 year of not doing anything, especially a year like this coming up. It's going to kind of set the precedence for what weeds germinate, seed, and then establish at the local level. So really be cognizant of that if you can. So just a couple of pictures. This I took yesterday driving out in the burn area. I saw this green up on the side of the road, and it's like, hey, that doesn't look right. And so I got out, took a picture, a little bit closer look, and this is what this little plant looked like. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my, we don't want this here. And so I'm not sure if anybody's picking up on what this plant is yet. I'll show you one more picture. So this is, for those that have ever ridden bicycles as a kid, you probably had run-ins with this plant. This is puncture vine or goat's head, lots and lots of common names. But this plant was, again, not sure if it was present prior to the burn in the extent that I saw it yesterday, but along many of the roadsides, it was literally a carpet. And so, again, this one has very, very persistent seeds in the soil. Dormancy can be many, many years. So this plant may have just been waiting. And now the opportunity has arisen, and it's growing. But this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to continue to happen over the next couple of years. So the question was, am I going to tell you how to get rid of that stuff? And unfortunately, no, because each one of those that I've covered could be, a 15-minute conversation. So I would say if you have any of those and you're interested, come to our website. We've got control efforts for almost all of those weeds listed. Call us. I'd be more than happy to walk through all the control strategies, because it can be complicated depending on what tools you want to use. This is spotted knapweed, and this came up after the Darby fire on Highway 4. Close relative to yellow star thistle, but has purple flowers. And there's a number of different knapweeds, but these are probably some of the worst weeds in the West, kind of thinking of some of the Midwest states. But it's a perennial, and this can be a booger to get rid of. And they've been working on it for a number of years, trying to control it after the Darby fire. But this, where the Butte fire happened, this is sort of prime growing conditions for a plant like this. So again, just be on the lookout for things that look out of place. So that's kind of the weed stuff. If you have specific weed questions, by all means, just call our office after the workshop, and we'll walk through control efforts. I'm going to finish on just a couple of slides on improving rangelands after fire. And so, prior to the fire, kind of, what were the conditions? We were talking about annual rangelands dominated by, pretty much introduced annuals from Europe, oats and barley and wheat and all of the plants that we know as all these grasses that grow up and down the foothills throughout the blue oaks. They're all introduced non-native grasses. But we like them because, they're great forage for wildlife and for livestock. There's some California natives kind of intermixed in there. You see some California native grasses and forbs, but in most of the case, it's non-native annuals. In most cases throughout the fire, there are definitely some areas where that high severity burn, where people were talking about, you have that white scorched ash. Those are areas where the soil probably got hot enough where it killed probably a fair amount of the seeds that are in the soil. So in those areas, those I would look very closely in terms of how you rehabilitate those. But in areas like this was a picture I took yesterday. You can see a lot of green up already starting to happen. And in areas like this, I would say don't do anything. if you had the burn come through, you can kind of see the mosaic of, yeah, there was some high intensity areas, but there's still some trees with leaves on it. There's a lot of trees that have burnt leaves or dead leaves. If you liked what you saw out there before in terms of the makeup of the grasses and the forbs, don't do anything. Just let things come back, because there's probably plenty of seeds in the soil to come back. However, with that said, there may be a few conditions where you might want to do some seeding for annual range. And so if the condition was, prior to the fire, your range was dominated by, a lot of noxious weeds like Medusa head, yellow star thistle, maybe that's the opportunity, is to maybe you want to reseed to bring some desirables back. My question and my concern would be, so you could come out and you can reseed now this fall, but you really didn't do much to control the existing population of weeds. And so you're still going to battle that this coming year. You may add some desirables back this year, but will they outcompete them? Probably not. You still are going to have to do some control strategy. So one option would be just go out there and do some reseeding now, see what happens. The other option I would probably lean more strongly towards would be, okay, do some really concerted control efforts this year to get those under control, and then do some reseeding next fall, a year from now, after you've burned up even more seeds of those noxious weeds in the soil. And then you really can kind of be a little bit more smaller, fine-tuning those control efforts of any, kind of remnant weeds coming through. Other conditions that you might be in, so prior to the fire, maybe your annual range had lots of bare spots, maybe it was because of compaction or overutilization. Those also might be areas where you might want to do some seeding. And I use this acronym up here, DPM, and I'll tell you what DPM stands for. What I just made that up. It's dryland pasture mix. I just didn't feel like writing it out multiple times. And so I'll tell you what my kind of thought of dryland pasture mix is on the next slide. But basically, so if you have bare ground, that might be another time to do some annual seeding. And then the other last one would be if you have lots of brush prior to the fire. So if you had lots of brush, most likely underneath that brush there wasn't a whole lot of annual grasses and forbs. This might be a chance to keep the brush species at bay or try to control them, but add some forage mix that you might utilize for livestock or for wildlife. So that would be a case where you'd also do some seeding. So what is dryland pasture mix? Well, there's lots and lots of examples of dryland pasture mix, and I'm not going to say one is totally the best and one's horrible. Again, these are pretty much all non-native species from Europe that we use, and so this is what you typically would find in an annual dryland pasture mix seed bag. It's typically going to be comprised of some annual ryegrass, the blando brome or soft chest, if you've heard of the term soft chest, which is a really good forage. That one's often in there. They sometimes will throw some perennials in there. I don't know if it's to make us happy or you happy, or sell some seeds from the perennial guys, I don't know. But they'll sometimes throw perennial ryegrass in there, maybe some orchard grass. They're usually in such small components it really doesn't make a difference. And then sometimes you'll get a mix of a couple of different clovers. So that's typically what's in a dryland pasture mix. How do you use it? Go out there and throw it out there. Get a broadcast spreader and throw it out there, about 20 pounds per acre, and that's what you need to do. And it's this time of the year is when you'd want to do it, with these first fall rains. You wait a couple more weeks, it's probably going to be too late, because you're already going to have some green up of other plants, and the seed that you put out there is not going to be able to compete. So, if you wait 2-3 weeks, I would say you may want to think about trying to control those undesirables that have already germinated first, and then go out and broadcast. And then the last thing is, if forage production, if you're trying to maximize forage production for livestock, you may want to also consider doing some fertilizing. And I would be very careful with that, especially in a condition where we just had this influx of lots and lots of debris from a burn. We already just added a bunch of fertilizer. So, doing some type of a soil test to kind of making sure that if you need to add something, that it's actually warranted. So I need to wrap it up. We've got lots and lots of resources. We've got some examples of weeds over there. There's contact information here. All of my stuff will be on the website. It's on the bottom of your first page flyer, so all of these phone numbers will all be on there as well. Yes, so the question was, he has lots of poison oak, and he's wondering if poison oak will come back. Yes. Yeah, it'll come back.
Is it a seed or is it just a root complex?
It'll do a little bit of stump sprouting, and there's many different growth. There's two main growth forms of poison oak. You'll see a vining poison oak that often is more shade, happens in shade, and then there's more of a shrub component. Same species, it's very dynamic in how it grows. From what I understand, it is really good at stump sprouting in terms of resprouting after disturbance like that. So I would expect some resprouting, but also it does spread by seeds, and so with this again kind of being thought of as a weed, it's going to be germinating and trying to beat everybody else out. So yeah, I would be on the lookout for it. Oh, so going to the manzanita question, yeah. So, and what was the about whether it'll resprout or how to control it? Yeah, how to control it. So. Yeah, so with any of those shrubs, whether it's poison oak, manzanita, buckbrush, ceanothus, I don't care what shrub it is, blackberry, they're all going to be coming back with a vengeance after the fire, either from stump sprouting or from seeds. And so, if you have just a few that are stump sprouting, you could probably come in there and either do some manual removal or spot treatments with an herbicide. If you have tons of germinating new seedlings coming up, which I've seen to be the case, and sometimes after a fire, you might have 1,000 seedlings per square foot of plants coming up, of shrubs. It's pretty hard to get a good, and you have an acre or 2 acres that is, that's a hard time to get, that's a lot of hand pulling. So you might want to definitely use a broadleaf herbicide. So there's many out there, but the one that I would say is most effective would be a product called triclopyr. That's the active ingredient. It's sold over the counter. If you just went to the local hardware store and brought Ortho Brush Be Gone, that's the active ingredient in that. And it's a broadleaf herbicide, meaning it only kills shrubs, trees, broadleaf plants. It won't kill grasses. So you have grasses coming up, you can come in and spray that over the top. It's going to kill all those shrubs, but leave the grasses alone. So triclopyr is the active ingredient. If you need larger quantities, go see Kevin at the Ag Department, and he can get you a license so you can buy agricultural supplies and larger quantities. Okay.
Follow-up, is mowing effective?
Is mowing effective on small manzanita? If you go out and mow probably every 2 weeks for a course of about 2 or 3 years, yes. But if you go out and mow once a year and do that for a few years, no, you're just giving it a haircut. It can have a very well-established root system, and so it resprouts very vigorously. And so in order to burn up all of its resources in the roots, it can take a long time. Okay.
I have a question, thank you. Earlier we were told broadcasting seeds is going to end up washing it down in the gully, and now you're suggesting seed. Is there somewhere in the middle we should know?
I'm sorry, so say the first part again?
Sure. We were told earlier that throwing seeds out now might just end up down into the culvert.
Yeah.
So how do we balance
Yeah, so he brought the question of earlier, there was a comment about, broadcasting seed. There was a comment about it just kind of washing off. And so I'm going to concur with my colleague that if you're seeding for erosion control, I wouldn't recommend it. So seeding specifically for erosion control, there's a lot of good data that shows it's not terribly effective. The most effective thing you can do for erosion control is cover. And that is cover through mulch. It can be, chipping up wood and spreading out, wood chips. It could be just the dead, dying and dead leaves that are falling naturally that's providing that cover. So just covering the soil is the best way to do it. But if you're just going out and adding seed for erosion control, not very effective. But in my case, why I'm advocating some seeds is if you want to improve some rangelands, then you're not necessarily doing it for erosion control, you're doing it for production for next spring. Okay, I'm sorry I've got to cut it off, but I need to introduce our next speaker. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Crovitz. Jeff works here locally with Calaveras County Public Works, and they have been just running all over trying to identify and fix and everything in terms of the county roads after the fire. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you. Jeff Crovitz, Director of Public Works, Calaveras County. First of all, thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry that we're here. I'm here to talk specifically about county roads within the fire area. I have about 81 miles of county roads within the burn area. Because of a long-term program we've had with CAL FIRE and inmate crews, we did a very good job in terms of keeping the fuel loads down on the edges of the road, and that really helped keep the roads open during the suppression activities and after. With my crews, we've gone out and assessed damage, permanent damage that needs repair and recovery on these roads, and we've also prioritized our roads. The priorities that I have right now are to keep access in and out of the fire area wherever possible. The major focus, or at least the initial focus for stabilization and keeping the roads open, was Mountain Ranch Road, of course above and below Mountain Ranch, Railroad Flat, Sheep Ranch. Sheep Ranch wasn't burned heavily and should recover very quickly, but it is a major corridor that reaches out to Highway 4. In terms of other major roads that we either did or did not take a lot of damage on, I anticipate we're going to take some significant damage depending on how much rain we get and how quickly it comes. Jesus Maria along Jesus Maria Creek and then heading up towards Highway 26, I don't have much hope that we can prevent what will be coming down those hillsides or what will be going down those creek beds. What we will be receiving, and I'm sure some earlier speakers have talked to this, is a normal rainstorm without the runoff that we're going to get. Will be moving faster. It will have more bulk to it because of the mass of the sediment, and that sediment itself will have a higher scouring power to the bank sides, and if they're supporting the road, it could be dangerous. One warning for all of you here: when you are driving and it's raining, if you see a creek that you would have passed and driven through in the past, don't do it. Even 3 inches of water that's laden with sediment is enough to pick up your vehicle. It's a different kind of a storm. Second recommendation, obviously, is to watch your storms. We at Public Works have reached out to National Weather Service, our Public Information Officer for the fire, our Office of Emergency Services, and define trigger rainfall events, and we will be notifying as many people as we can, and I know that's a challenge in the burn area, of rain events that could trigger mud flows, debris flows. So keep your ears peeled to the radios, if you have internet, keep your internet on. If you have AM, FM radios, that's a good source. Leave it on when you know rain is coming. So what have I done on the roads? What we did? Our first priority, of course, was the removal of hazard trees, and those would be trees that would either fall onto the roadway or fall and slide and block a ditch or block a creek that would then cause flooding to overtop. Most of those efforts are completed. I believe we're pretty well stable along the major roadways that I mentioned earlier, and we're now reaching out and doing similar work on some of the smaller roads out where we know we have folks that are still living. And additionally, we've identified our culverts. You probably see stakes sticking out at culverts. That's hopefully to see them after a flood event. If they've been damaged, then we put them on a list to replace, potentially upsize if it looks like they need to be upsized, we will be doing that. And we are also protecting our culvert inlets and our outlets from debris flows from plugging and also from doing additional scour on the outlet ends of these culverts. So bottom line picture is the major roads in and out of the fire, we are attempting to keep open in every way that we can. And then as time allows, we're moving on out. I expect that there's going to be some problem areas on Whiskey Slide. I'm hoping that we can keep it open. It might be closed for a few days here and there, depending on the rain events, but that's my hope. There's some other areas that are at risk, East and West Murray Road. If you've been out there, Doster's got some issues. But we are moving along. I have got 2 crews of CCC kids working with my road crews. They're helping with the debris removal, the culvert protection, and such. I have another project moving up off of the McColumney into the McColumney River on Ponderosa Road, which is the one county road that accesses Calaveras side of the McColumney River drainage. That project is in concert with East Bay Mud, and I have a crew of CCC. We've got most of our work done on that number of miles of a very steep roadway that was pretty severely burned. We've stabilized on both sides of the road, broadcast a little seed and straw. So there's the cover that was spoken to earlier. And we've done a little contour felling of trees to hopefully keep things stabilized. And we're protecting the culvert inlets and of course the culvert outlets. And we will lay a little bit more base rock, roll it, grade it, and then shut the road down. It will be available if we have subsequent projects to get in there and do watershed restoration activities, but I'm hoping that that road holds together through the winter. Trying to think if I've got anything else on the roads. Pretty brief report. We are working as hard as we can. A couple of other items that I think you'll be interested in is we are preparing sandbag stations. I have CCC crews that are filling sandbags and we're deploying them. Last night and yesterday we deployed a station at the community park in Mountain Ranch, and we fully intend, as more rain is coming, to deploy to another 6 or 7 sites throughout the county, even a couple of sites outside of the burn area, because I do anticipate higher than normal flows outside of the burn area based on the conditions inside of the burn area. I think that's about it. Short and sweet, or short and sad. I'll take some questions.
When do you plan to clean up the West Point Creek Road on the third portion of the
The question is, when do we plan to clean up the western portion, gravel portion of West Murray Creek Road on the San Andreas side? I don't have an answer to that. Understood. But I don't have an answer to that. I try to let my road superintendent take the lead. We try to meet every day and talk about it and talk about our priorities. And we go from there.
Jeff, you mentioned earlier, this during a rain event, tune to AM or FM radio. Do you have any program on public work to contact any specific stations with information? How does the information get from your office to those stations? What are those stations?
Okay. The question had to do with the information flow in terms of potential road closures, rain events, sandbagging stations. The flow of information is coming from the road crews who are out in the field, through the Public Works office in San Andreas, and from there it goes up to the OES Center, and it goes to the Public Information Office for the fire. The Public Information Office will be the one deploying it to the radio stations. And the radio stations we're talking about are our local radio stations. I don't have those numbers at my hand. There you go. 90.7, I believe, was one of them.
3.9, I think it's the same one in different areas.
So, in some cases, AM will work better. In other cases, FM will work better, depending if you're high or low within the burn area.
Internet connection, will we go on the internet or?
Several places you can go, but my best bet would be the Butte Fire Recovery Site, and that is the site that's maintained by the Public Information Officer on the fire.
Yes. Are there any particular set of conditions or things that we drive around and we see you would like us to report to you? What should we be looking out to report to you to help out of this?
First thing, when you're driving around, I want you to be careful. Take care of yourself first. Okay? And communications in this event is kind of a special and unique challenge. Most of us don't have landline phones yet returned to us. Very few of us in this fire area have ever had cell phone service. So in spite of the one tower that AT&T has put up in Mountain Ranch, that works really well now in Mountain Ranch, the rest of the burn area doesn't have much communication, if any. And internet, of course, is mostly out there going to be satellite type of a service. So communication in and out is difficult. I know that our partners at FEMA and OES are working to see if it's possible to get radios deployed that would allow you to receive emergency broadcast messages and also push a button if you need help. Back to your initial question, which was if you're looking for something on the road and you want to report it, obviously down trees, obviously down brush, obviously plugged culverts. Those are the types of things that are immediate threats to the traveling public. And if you find those and have the ability to get to a phone, call Public Works. That's 754-6401.
On weekends too?
Let's see, on weekends, I think would probably be best to go through 911. And then they, through that dispatch, will get to my crews and they'll deploy. Far back.
I noticed on Sioux Marine, you might call it the middle section of it, where you have tree crews in trimming. They're cutting a lot of trees that appear to me to be outside the right of way. Can you tell me what the criteria is that allows them to cut outside of the right of way? And also, is that practice going to go to a lot more county roads, i.e. Whistle Slide, West Marine Street?
Okay, the question is that the gentleman noticed that there was a lot of tree cutting and tree trimming along Jesus Maria Road that appeared to be outside of the existing or implied or prescribed right-of-way for the road. There's a number of crews that are out there doing tree falling, brushing, limbing of trees. PG&E follow-up crews, AT&T crews, as well as Public Works crews. I can't speak much more than in general circumstances in terms of the PG&E and AT&T crews, other than that the Public Utilities Commission allows them to remove and drop hazard trees that have a potential for falling into their easements and doing damage to their facilities.
But isn't their easement like 25 feet wide beneath the utility lines?
In many cases, the easement is narrower than what they're trimming. But if you have a 100-foot tree within 100 feet of the utility lines, that tree can be...
I'm talking about outside the PUC easement.
Okay.
Outside of them.
And so I've given you as much information as I really have on the public utilities. Let me talk a little bit about the road and what I have discussed with my staff. In many of our county roads have been here forever, and they do not have fee title right of way. They have a prescribed or an implied easement, and different interpretations on those. From my perspective and what I've been discussing with my crews is our duty is to keep these roads open for the traveling public, to provide emergency services in and out, and to provide you access in and out of your homes. If there is a tree that has a potential for falling into the right-of-way, onto the road, into a ditch, potentially plugging up a water course that would overtop, we would remove that. What we are trying to protect is the passage of vehicles, the use of the road. So beyond that, we're not trying to do anything. Again, I can't say which crews are out there without knowing specifically.
But they're cutting green trees outside.
My crews, I don't think are doing that. My crews have been out on a number of days with a CAL FIRE forester, identifying trees that are hazard trees, meaning that the tree will die. There is no intent to take out willy-nilly trees that won't die. I have noticed a few branches that we've lifted off of that were overhanging on the road. But no, from my knowledge, and I haven't seen it directly, my crews are not instructed to take out living trees. And they're taking out trees as directed by a forester who has been traveling with them for a number of days. But again, remember, we have a number of different entities out there that are all doing this work.
Is it your crews, or do you know who's putting the red X's, who's making that determination? A lot of trees have red X's.
That's the tree company.
Probably a utility company. In the far back, that Marty back there? What Marty is talking about, and the question is, CAL FIRE put out an initial assessment, post-fire watershed report that talked about the severity of the burn. Many of these exhibits on the wall are directly from that report. Also contained in that report were a table of 26 locations that in the initial and relatively quick brief assessment identified potential threats to life, property, infrastructure. And so what Marty is asking about is what are those types of infrastructure that were identified, and what are we doing about them? They have been broken up into several groups. We have some homes that are potentially in slideway, meaning that they survived the fire only to be threatened by potential mud flows coming their way. I've been working with NRCS, and NRCS has taken on, within one of their emergency watershed protection programs, identifying, designing, and helping with the funding and the installation of protective measures for those homes. Now, some of those homes are inhabited or uninhabited and haven't been inhabited for a number of years, nor do the owners have an intent. And there's only been one of those. For that particular one, what we were trying to do is abate any potential hazardous materials and not put anything else into that. If it survives, it survives. Some of the other types of locations that have been put into that high priority table on that report would be the low water crossing at Halver near Jesus Maria. That's fairly obvious to all of us, I would think. The culvert at Wet Gulch on Whiskey Slide is another location. So for the location on Whiskey Slide, for example, my crews have gone in, we've removed some brush, we've tried to make the drainage more free-flowing, remove potential debris that could get caught up in that crossing, and at that point we will then begin monitoring. So we have addressed and discussed all of them. A lot of them are in harm's way, such harm's way that, again, we are not going to attempt to save it. We don't think that there's much that we can do at this point. One more piece that I am doing with Public Works is I have a couple of teams from DWR that are coming next week, and these are flood fighting teams. So their task, their experience, and their expertise is to identify sites that are subject to debris and flooding, and then deploying walls, sandbags, trash racks, whatever will help to mitigate that flooding on our infrastructure. So we are deploying that very soon, early next week. I don't know if everyone heard, but I'll try to summarize that question. Immediately following or even during the fire, we have a lot of elderly citizens who are not very mobile, or maybe not even connected to communication systems, who were potentially in harm's way or in need of assistance. The difficulty, as all of you know, is there was extremely limited access in and out during suppression activities. If you chose to leave, you might not get back for a while. So therefore, many people chose not to leave. From the public assistance side, we have had any number of different agencies going out. The one with probably the largest presence for elderly, disabled people in the fire area has been through our social services, and they are still going out, high numbers of them. So the follow-up to her question, which I think is really pertinent, is what are we doing to identify who's still out there, and are they, or do they have potential of being in harm's way for flood and debris flows? And yes, we are working on that in terms of putting together our new post-fire aerial mapping, location of structures, location of electric meters that are still running. We're using all of the resources that we have available, including the people who have signed up with the Cal Recycle program to remove burned debris. All of the resources that we have, we are trying to coalesce those and identify these people, compare them to the mapping that we have that have identified high probability of flows, potentially steep slopes above their improvements, and then we would go and reach out to them. So it's not a perfect system. We don't have in any way a complete data set on this. And so for you all, keep an eye on your neighbors. Do as much as you can to reach out. I know that you're struggling yourself, but I'm afraid that's what we're left with. Marty again. The question was, what's the deadline to sign up for FEMA help for that registration? I don't know that offhand. I haven't. 23rd of November, thank you very much. So November 23rd, for those of you who know neighbors who have not yet signed up, strongly recommend outreach and let them know that their best course of action is to sign up with the FEMA program to be able to get what assistance is available to them. That would be the individual assistance program. If you are interested, there are programs that I'm utilizing in Public Works. Public assistance is one of them. That will help me with the county roads. I have an emergency repair program that's administered by Federal Highways that will help me with what are called federal assistance or federal aid roads. Those are the major roads, the Mountain Ranch, Railroad Flat, Jesus Maria, Frico City Road, for those programs. So I am doing everything I can to follow the monies that are available for recovery and repair. I'll repeat that. November 6th is the last day to sign up if you have burned structures on your property for the Cal Recycle, the state program, state-funded program to remove that debris and certify your lots as clean, ready to build again. Yes, the question was that many of you who have cell phones, specifically smartphones, and have downloaded an app called Nixle, will get a siren warning on your cell phone of a potential event that's coming. And yes, OES will be using the Nixle system, but I believe it's Nixle.
And it worked even though I don't have any kind of phone reception at my house, so.
Yeah, works on the internet, works on mobile phone signals. Okay, that's a challenging question. The question is, what is my department, Public Works, doing about private roads within the county that people are still using, that people are still living on, and are being used by more than just the property owners on those roads? That is very difficult for us to address, and the reason that it's difficult for us to address is we barely have enough money, or we don't have enough money to do the road work on the public roads. For us to go out and spend public funds on a private road, we don't have that right. We don't have the ability to essentially go onto private property and do that. What I've tried to do on those is when I'm approached by homeowners associations and they want to know what can they do, how can they do it, are there other resources out there, I share as much as I can. But that's about the limit of what I can do. Okay. The question is with West Murray Creek Road, county owned but not county maintained, post-fire maintained by CAL FIRE with support from the county. Are there any plans to continue that? If that's what we've done in the past, that's what we will continue to do. Okay, thank you very much.